No wonder we have so much inflation that's around us. I still don't think that the Federal Reserve should be cutting its interest rates or increasing the money supply in the economy to do so, because there's already too much money floating around. And so we're still going to see boom and bust cycles in the process. Hello, welcome to this week's Economy, episode 75. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. Vance, Ginn. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. So number one, DNC meets this week. In the news, the Democratic National Convention begins in Chicago on Monday, culminating in Kamala Harris's acceptance speech on Thursday night. It's an opportunity to get more clarity on Harris's economic agenda. The convention is also aimed at Gen Z and younger demographics as they live stream the whole convention in vertical video for TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. My take is that we're going to hear a lot of the same things we've already been talking about with the economic agenda from Kamala Harris, whether that be increases in government spending and running up another 1.7 trillion plus in national debt, price controls for groceries and food that makes it more, rationing and shortages everywhere, or whether it be more handouts, more quote unquote free college and things of that nature, or Medicare for all even. Maybe we'll hear something about healthcare. These are all things that take us further down the road of socialism and less prosperity, more poverty in the process. This is exactly what we do not need. And so I know I have issues with what the Republican platform is as well. But this one is certainly going to be baked in with a lot of bad policies overall. It'll be a lot of show and glamour for the DNC convention like it was the RNC convention, but it's something that we'll want to take a look at over the next few days. Number two, monopoly Google. In the news, following the recent decision by Federal District Court for the District of Columbia saying that Google illegally abused its search monopoly, a federal judge is actively considering breaking up the tech giant. A court-ordered Google breakup would be the U.S.'s most consequential form of this. However, figuring out how to split up the company would be challenging. My take is that this decision shouldn't have been made to begin with. Google is not a monopoly. Even when you look at the searches that go on online or the text searches or whatever else, these are decisions made by consumers, by you. I know I use Google search all the time. I mean, it's the one that gives me the best results of things that I really want to see compared to Bing and other types that are out there. And that's the issue here, is that there are different search engines that you could use, DuckDuckGo and other types of things you could use out there. But people choose to use Google. And so if you're doing that's bringing you satisfaction as a consumer. So instead of government coming in with antitrust rules and everything else and trying to regulate it away or break up these companies that are providing a service to the individuals along with profitability and everything else, this would be a disservice to the consumer, to the producers, to the workers, and to the bottom line of a lot of other businesses that use Google in their process. And so this is another step for government to step in the way of people being able to prosper. And I'm not all about that. I really want people to prosper at the end of the day. And so antitrust should really be about government is the true monopoly here in so many aspects of our lives. Go after them. Stop going after the private sectors. Let's get on to it. Number three. Economy is a major election issue, as you would imagine. So in the news, with the economy a top concern for voters, Trump and Harris are rolling out their economic agendas. At the end of the last week, Harris debuted her economic agenda, which included price caps on groceries, tax breaks for families, and lower health premiums through the American Affordable Care Act. Bernie Sanders says her platform is a, quote, strong progressive agenda, end quote. Trump is also emphasizing the rising inflation of the cost of goods and services. What we've seen is massive inflation over the last few years. I've talked a lot about this, from the shutdowns during COVID, the bad lockdowns that we had across the country. That led to a lot of shortages and temporary sort of price spikes. But the longer term effect was because of the excessive government spending by Congress and by the administrations who approved of those budgets, which led to massive amount of debt, an increase of more than about $10 trillion just over the last 4 years. And of course, the Federal Reserve, our central bank, they monetized much of that debt, increasing their balance sheet from 4 trillion up to 9 trillion. It's back up to around 7 trillion now, but it's still substantially higher than it was back in 2019. No wonder we have so much inflation that's around us. I still don't think that the Federal Reserve should be cutting its interest rates or increasing the money supply in the economy to do so, because there's already too much money floating around. And so we're still going to see boom and bust cycles in the process. And these new policies that are being pushed by Kamala Harris are just bad policies. When you think about the price controls, the $25,000 for home first-time home buyers. It just increases the demand with no increase in supply, and therefore you're going to get higher home prices in the process, which help out those who have a home now, but also means higher property taxes and other things, and it reduces affordability for many people, as this is likely to contribute to higher interest rates as well because of the increase in the national debt. So this is all culminating into a massive problem in the housing market and the grocery market and just rationing in general. We need to be getting government out of the way, not by putting more government in there to solve government failures, because remember, that exacerbates the problem in the process. Well, what's happening in the states? Number 4, Louisiana treasurer wants to remove personal income tax. In the news, Louisiana's Treasurer John Fleming wants to eliminate personal income taxes to attract more opportunities to the state and help people thrive. My take is that eliminating income taxes in Louisiana and every other state is the right thing to do. It's got to start, though, with responsible budgeting. Spending less is really what it should be about compared to what they're normally spending. And what I like to see is not revenue targets where you hit certain revenues or tax collections from a rainy day fund or other places, general revenue. That focuses too much on the revenue side. What we really need to focus on is spending. Restrain spending at the state level and use surpluses to buy down, these income taxes. First flatten them and then buy them down to zero. I think would be a great approach in Louisiana, just like in other states that have income taxes. That should be the big one that you should start going over after as much as possible to get it to zero. You talk about more people working and incentives to work and more economic growth. That's the way to do it. Then you can think about what to do next. I mean, something I've worked on in Texas and Wyoming and some other states is to use surplus funding to buy down school property taxes, which are typically controlled mostly by the school finance formulas by the state. So that tends to be the best connection there. That's not a subsidy of the local governments. It's a way to get rid of a tax and fund it through mostly sales taxes, which I believe is the least burdensome form of tax. All taxes have burdens, but that's the least burdensome, and that's what it allows for more economic growth. So the Treasurer, John Fleming, and others in Louisiana, actually, including those folks at the Pelican Institute that I do some work with, are on the right track here. Spend less, lower income taxes, and eliminate them as soon as possible. And you talk about more people entering the state, because there's been out-migration in Louisiana for years. In the South, that just doesn't happen very often, but it's definitely happening there from many bad policies. This would be a great way to turn things around. So, number 5, more job losses than just from Hurricane Beryl. The news, the unemployment rose in more than half the U.S. states last month, suggesting that the weakness in the national jobs report that spooked markets extended beyond Hurricane Beryl. Well, in July, the latest state-level jobs report showed that 22 out of the 50 states, nearly half of all states, lost jobs in non-farm employment. Even Texas lost jobs of 14,000. Texas also lost jobs in the month of June of 9,000. A lot of that was from Hurricane Beryl, so we got to keep that in mind. But that's 23,000 fewer jobs than otherwise would have had. But there's been now lost jobs across much of the country. And we saw the national labor market data, which are about revising it down about 1 million jobs in non-farm. Imagine that, which is what I've been saying, that this is not a strong economy. It's a very weak economy on many levels, but now we're seeing it across many of the states. The 22 states lost that. More than half, their unemployment rates are going up and going up fast, which is one reason why I think we're in a very weak, fragile economy, if not a recession currently, given what's happening across the states. And when you look at, California and New York, more progressive policies, they did have some job creation added last month, but their job growth rate of the last year still is staying pretty low compared to places like Texas and Florida. Florida actually has the highest out of these largest 4 states. And so that's something I think we need to really look at, is more pro-growth policies and getting government out of the way. Number 6, states should lead in free market energy policy. In the news, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, also known as ERCOT, projections indicate that Texas energy demand will nearly double by 2030, increasing from 85 to 150 gigawatts in just 6 years. This revelation has sparked significant concern among state policymakers and industry leaders. I had a piece recently in the Austin American-Statesman on this very issue, talking about the need for free market energy policies. We need to get away from handouts from renewable sources of energy like wind and solar that are not reliable, like natural gas. But we also need to not have handouts to reliable energy sources either, like natural gas from the Texas Energy Fund that's giving low interest rate loans to companies, many of those who may not like us very much, for investments in natural gas projects like BlackRock and other companies. And so I think And I say not like us in the sense of not liking natural gas, not liking some of the things that are heading in that direction, because they've been a big factor of ESG, environmental social governance issues, and pushing us more in that direction in a lot of ways through their funding and pension funds and everything else. And so I think this is a big concern for me. Instead, let's remove government obstacles, allow for more nuclear energy. That's where we need to see it for the future. That's renewable, that's thermal, that's going to allow for us to have a more bright and prosperous future, instead of getting government to put their thumb on the scale of one way or the other. That's not the direction we need to go. Hopefully, Texas will make the right decision there. So, media hits and other things that I have going on. Well, this week I published pieces or given quotes and completed interviews at Fox Business with Varney and Company on inflation and how the Fed keeps driving it and how we need to cut spending, cut taxes, cut regulations, and cut money printing. That's the key part there. I had that piece in the Austin American Statesman on free market energy policy. I was on the Ed Choice podcast. Great discussion there, talking about school choice and the need for it and my background with it. So don't miss that. NTD News about Harris's bad price caps. So I talked about that there. I was in the Texas Fiscal Responsibility blog on the frozen Texas budget, something that's really needed there, the excessive spending that's going on in Texas. There would be a lot more room for property tax relief if that's the case. I was also at the Texas Policy Research Institute on occupational licensing and the cost of that, and in the Kansas Policy Institute on state labor market trends, among many others. You don't want to miss those over the next few days on my show notes page. Recording the Let People Prosper show, and I've been going on there as I had an excellent episode 110 this Tuesday with Randy Hicks, who is the president of Georgia Center for Opportunity, talking about welfare reforms and how to get people out of poverty, not just surviving in there, but actually living a fruitful and prosperous life, which a lot of that comes with community and work. This upcoming Tuesday episode is episode 111 of the Let People Prosper show. It's with Dr. Paul Tice about energy policy, especially ESG, reliable power, climate change, and so much more. He's an adjunct professor over at the New York University, so you don't want to miss that. The quote of the week is by Murray Rothbard, a great economist that you should go and check out if you haven't heard of him already. Quote, professional politicians don't mind if price controls cause shortages of healthcare. In fact, they welcome the prospect because then they can impose rationing. They can impose priorities and tell everyone how much of what kind of medical care they can have. And besides, there's that deeply satisfying rush of power, end quote. This is the same thing goes with groceries and food, what you should eat, what you should not eat, education, where you should go to take your child and not. There's so many ways that government continues to control our lives through economic policy, and it's a bad thing. It doesn't let people prosper. The verse of the week is Colossians 3:23, quote, work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people, end quote. Amen. This is what I do every day. It's my calling to let people prosper. That's why I have these podcasts and everything else. And one reason why I hope that you will share it. Give me a 5-star rating. Share with your friends and families. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for listening every week. Remember, you can find all this information and more at vanceginn.com, or go over my Substack newsletter where you'll get this right in your inbox at vanceginn.substack.com. That will help me out a lot. Even if you want to be a paid subscriber, check that out as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. Until next time, let people prosper.